Jenny, it all happens apparently at 4 o'clock tomorrow. Markets will just be closing. How kind do we think the president is going to be? And what do you make of these different stories? It depends on the hour, not the day, as to what we're hearing from the president.
I mean, part of this is policy process that, generally speaking, you present options to the president for him to choose from, and there's debates and deliberations with senior staff. In his case, it might not just be the people in government posts, but other stakeholders that he's talking to, and then he'll make a decision. And I think for President Trump in particular, that can be somewhat of an iterative process where it can, change as he's talking to different people and getting new information. I think also what it suggests is today those reports were due from Commerce and USTR, other government agencies advising on what the tariff rate should be. They might still be making a decision, in particular if they're thinking about tailoring tariffs to individual countries. There's a lot of questions about exactly how you would quantify non-tariff barriers, what level you would set those tariffs at, if you're factoring in conversations he's having with those countries to negotiate in advance. A lot of potential factors at play. Maybe a decision is still underway.
Well, he has 27 hours, I guess, to finalize whatever decision ultimately he wants to make before he actually addresses this subject with the American people. But the suggestion that whatever tariffs he does decide on will be less than what is charged on U.S. imports, who would that be best news for, Jenny, in terms of people or countries that do have high rates on U.S. imports right now that may breathe somewhat of a sigh of relief at that notion?
So part of it depends on how you're defining what they charge us, right? Is he talking about the tariff barriers in particular, in which case that's a good news for Southeast Asia, for other developing countries where those tariff gaps tend to be pretty significant. India is another example there. If he's talking about non-tariff barriers, that's a very different set of countries. That's largely the EU, for example, the VAT. Now, I think based on his other comments about the EU, he's unlikely to give them a little bit of a pass. But there are other countries that he's been talking to quite extensively. India and the UK are prime examples there, where maybe he's thinking about it from that perspective. He might also be thinking about it in terms of what they're doing outside the trade realm. So Mexico is a good example there. What have they been doing on fentanyl? What have they been doing on immigration? And then a third consideration might be, how is the stock market reacting to some of these theories that are out there, and how would reciprocal tariffs on some of our closest trade partners impact the U.S. economy?
Take us behind the scenes for a minute, realizing that Donald Trump could be operating on gut to some extent tomorrow. You talked about the reports that are due today. You worked for the Biden White House as an advisor. Is there some big room in the OEOB next door where people are out with maps and binders and they're up all night figuring this out right now? What happens in the 24 hours ahead of an announcement like this?
Yes, I think up until now, USTR Commerce and other staff have probably been working around the clock to complete these reports. I mean, I think Secretary Lutnick put it right. This is like trying to negotiate trade deals with all your major trade partners in the span of a couple of weeks. That's incredibly difficult work to be doing. I think now a lot of it is going to be the deliberations at the senior level based on those reports, based on those policy recommendations about what they actually implement, and then figuring out the rollout plan. I mean, just before coming in here, the White House announced these tariffs are going to go into effect immediately after the announcement tomorrow.